The transport ship Valdris hummed through the void between star systems, carrying its cargo of alien soldiers toward what most considered a routine deployment. In the main cargo hold, representatives from 12 different species sat in their respective groups, weapons secured and armor polished for the mission ahead. Captain Zethkar of the Hegemony Defense Corps stood before the assembled troops, his 4 arms gesturing as he outlined their objective. The insectoid captain's mandibles clicked with authority as he spoke in the common tongue that all military personnel learned during basic training. "Our mission is simple," Zethkar announced, his voice carrying easily through the ship's recycled atmosphere. "We are to establish a forward operating base on the recently discovered world designated as Terra 7. Intelligence reports indicate the planet is inhabited by a primitive species that has somehow managed to develop basic spaceflight capabilities." A low rumble of amusement rippled through the assembled soldiers. Sergeant Voxtel, a hulking warrior from the crystalline Zenthran Empire, raised one of his massive stone-like fists. "Captain, are we seriously being deployed to handle primitives? My youngest hatchling could conquer a world full of pre-space barbarians." More laughter echoed through the hold. The soldiers came from some of the most advanced military forces in the galaxy. The Hegemony alone had conquered over 300 star systems. The idea that they would need an entire company to deal with primitives seemed almost insulting. Private Nixara, a sleek amphibian from the aquatic depths, flicked her tongue dismissively. "I heard these creatures call themselves humans. What kind of name is that? It sounds like something a child would call their pet." "Humans," repeated Corporal Thandros, a reptilian saurian whose scales shifted color with his amusement. "I looked up their file in the ship's database. They only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 of their years ago. 50 years. My people had interstellar empires when we were still developing proper language centers in our brains." The laughter grew louder. Even the normally stoic ethereal warriors, beings of pure energy contained within mechanical shells, seemed amused by the assignment. One of them, designated Unit 774, spoke in its harmonic electronic voice. "Analysis indicates these humans have participated in only minor territorial disputes among themselves. No evidence of large-scale interplanetary warfare experience. Threat assessment, negligible." Captain Zethkar allowed the jokes to continue for a few moments before raising one of his hands for silence. "Yes, the assignment seems beneath our capabilities. However, High Command has specific reasons for wanting an overwhelming show of force. This human species has begun exploring beyond their home system. They've established small colonies on 3 nearby worlds." "3 whole colonies," Nixara said with mock reverence. "Surely that makes them a galactic superpower." "Perhaps they'll surrender when they see our ships approaching," suggested another voice from the crowd. "Save us the trouble of actual combat." "Combat?" Thandros' scales rippled with colors indicating extreme amusement. "Against humans? I've seen their physical specifications. They're barely stronger than Fenarian younglings, and everyone knows the Fenarians are the weakest species in civilized space." The group dissolved into fresh peals of laughter. Stories began circulating about human weakness and primitive technology. Someone had heard that humans still used chemical propellants for some of their weapons. Another soldier claimed that human ships were so slow they took months to travel between planets in their own system. "I heard," said a voice from the back of the group, "that humans don't even have natural armor or enhanced physical capabilities. They're just soft." This comment brought the house down. Soldiers from species with natural carapaces, dense bone structures, or built-in weapon systems found the idea of soft warriors absolutely hilarious. Lieutenant Corsine, a feline predator from the Nexus Coalition, stood up and stretched her considerable frame. At nearly 8 feet tall with retractable claws and enhanced reflexes, she represented the kind of natural-born warrior that dominated galactic military forces. Soft warriors with primitive weapons. This should be entertaining, at least. "Maybe we should bring recording equipment," suggested someone else. "Document the fastest conquest in military history." Captain Zethkar's mandibles clicked again, but this time with slight irritation rather than authority. The jokes were getting out of hand, and while he privately agreed with most of his soldiers' assessments, discipline needed to be maintained. "Enough," he said, his voice cutting through the chatter. "Regardless of the enemy's capabilities, we are professional soldiers of the Hegemony Defense Corps. We will approach this mission with the same seriousness we would apply to any other assignment. Of course, Captain, Voxtel rumbled, though his tone suggested anything but seriousness. We'll try not to accidentally destroy their entire civilization before they have a chance to surrender. The comment brought another wave of laughter. These soldiers had fought against some of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They had seen action against the hive-minded swarm, creatures that reproduced faster than they could be killed. They had battled the energy beings of the Void Cluster, enemies that could phase through normal matter at will. They had survived campaigns against the mechanical legions of the machine worlds, where every fallen enemy could potentially be rebuilt and sent back into battle. Humans, by comparison, seemed like a joke. A species that had barely crawled out of their own gravity well, with no significant military achievements and technology that belonged in a museum. "Sir," asked Private Yelmoth, a gaseous being contained within an environmental suit, "will we even need our heavy weapons for this? It seems like overkill." "Standing orders are to bring full combat loadouts," Zethkar replied. "High Command wants to ensure we can handle any surprises." "What surprises could there possibly be?" Thandros wondered aloud. "Are we worried they might throw rocks at us, maybe sharp sticks?" The laughter that followed this comment was particularly loud. The idea of primitive humans facing off against advanced galactic military technology with Stone Age weapons struck everyone as absurdly funny. As the soldiers continued their jokes and speculation, none of them paid much attention to the quiet figure sitting alone in the corner of the hold. Commander Reistock had said nothing during the entire conversation. The ancient warrior, scarred from countless battles across a career spanning over 2 centuries, simply sat with his eyes closed, appearing to meditate. Reistock was a legend among the hegemony forces. He had personally led the assault that broke the Saurian resistance during the Outer Rim conflicts. He had been present during the siege of the Machine Worlds, where he had single-handedly destroyed an entire automated fortress complex. His tactical genius was matched only by his personal combat skills, and soldiers throughout the fleet spoke his name with reverence typically reserved for historical figures. But none of the younger soldiers in the hold seemed interested in the old commander's opinion about their current assignment. They were too busy entertaining themselves with increasingly elaborate jokes about human incompetence. "I wonder if they'll even know how to operate their own weapons," mused Nixara. "Maybe we should bring instruction manuals to help them surrender properly." "Do they even have proper weapons?" asked another voice. "I heard they still use projectile firearms that require manual reloading." Manual reloading, Corsine's feline features expressed pure disbelief. "What do they do when they run out of ammunition? Throw the empty weapon at their enemies." The mental image this created sent the entire group into fresh fits of laughter. Advanced military firearms used energy cells that could fire thousands of rounds before needing replacement, or drew power directly from the user's armor systems. The idea of stopping in the middle of a firefight to manually insert new projectiles seemed ludicrous. "Maybe that's their secret weapon," suggested Unit 774 in its electronic monotone, which somehow made the comment even funnier. "Confusion tactics. The enemy dies laughing while watching humans fumble with their primitive equipment." "Don't give them too much credit," Voxtel said, his rocky features managing to convey smugness despite their mineral composition. "Confusion requires intelligence. From what I've read, humans barely qualify as sapient by galactic standards." This comment sparked a new round of speculation about human intelligence levels. Someone claimed to have read that humans still practice something called war, where they fought among themselves for control of resources, rather than simply establishing logical territorial boundaries based on species compatibility and resource optimization. "They fight each other?" Nixara's tongue flicked out in a gesture of distaste. "How inefficient! No wonder they've never developed beyond a single-system civilization." "It gets worse," Thandros added, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. "I heard they don't even have a unified planetary government. They're divided into hundreds of smaller territories, each with their own military forces." The implications of this struck the assembled soldiers as particularly amusing. Every major spacefaring species had unified under a single governmental structure long before achieving interstellar travel. The idea of a divided species attempting to project power beyond their homeworld seemed like a recipe for disaster. "So we're not even fighting the best they have to offer," Corsine concluded. We're fighting whatever random group happened to be sent on this particular mission. Probably they're rejects, someone suggested. The ones too incompetent for whatever passes for their real military. As the conversation continued along these lines, several soldiers began making informal wagers about how quickly the mission would be completed. The most optimistic bets suggested the humans would surrender as soon as they detected the approaching hegemony fleet. The pessimistic predictions gave humanity a few hours of resistance before being overwhelmed by superior firepower and tactics. Nobody bet on the humans lasting longer than a single day. Private Jexlor, a young warrior on his first major deployment, raised a tentacle appendage. Sir, what are we supposed to do with human prisoners? Do we have holding facilities that can accommodate their biology? Good question, Zethkar acknowledged. Human physiology is carbon-based, similar to saurians and several other species. Standard detention cells should be adequate, though we'll need to adjust atmospheric mixture and temperature controls. How many prisoners are we expecting? Asked another soldier. Intelligence estimates suggest we'll encounter between 500 and 2,000 human military personnel, the captain replied. Their colony on Terra 7 is reportedly protected by a single military outpost. 2,000? Voxtel's massive frame shook with laughter. What are they planning to do with 2,000 primitives against a full company of hegemony shock troops? Form a really big circle and throw stones. The mental image this created was apparently irresistible to the assembled soldiers. Jokes began flowing about human tactics that might involve large numbers of primitive warriors, attempting to overwhelm advanced technology through sheer quantity. Maybe they'll try to ram our ships with theirs, suggested Yelmoth, like some kind of desperate last resort. Their ships probably aren't even fast enough to ram anything, Nixara pointed out. We'd have to slow down and let them catch up. That would be the polite thing to do, agreed Corsine. Give them a sporting chance before we vaporize their entire fleet. As the laughter continued, none of the soldiers noticed that Commander Reistock had opened his eyes and was listening to their conversation with an expression that might have been concern. The old warrior's scarred features remained impassive, but something in his gaze suggested that he didn't share his subordinates' confidence about the upcoming mission. But the younger soldiers were far too caught up in their own amusement to pay attention to the silent commander. They continued trading jokes and stories about human incompetence, each tale more outrageous than the last. Someone claimed that human military training consisted primarily of running around in circles and shouting at each other. Another soldier insisted that human weapons were so primitive they were more dangerous to the user than to any potential target. I heard, said a voice from near the back of the group, that humans don't even have proper military ranks. They just choose leaders by who can shout the loudest. This particular piece of misinformation sent the group into another round of hysterical laughter. The idea of military hierarchy determined by volume rather than competence struck them as perfectly representative of human primitiveness. Well, Zethkar said eventually, trying to regain some semblance of order, whatever their leadership selection process might be, we'll be encountering them soon enough. The Valdris asterisk should reach the Terra 7 system within 6 hours. 6 hours, mused Voxtel. Barely enough time to properly prepare our weapons. This is going to be the shortest conquest in recorded history. Should we even bother with a preliminary bombardment? Asked Thandros. It seems like a waste of ammunition. Standing orders call for a demonstration of force before demanding surrender, Zethkar replied. High Command wants to give them a chance to yield peacefully. How generous, Nixara said with mock sincerity. Though I suppose even primitives deserve the opportunity to avoid complete annihilation. Besides, added Corsine, a peaceful surrender would save us the trouble of cleaning human remains out of our landing craft. The conversation continued along these lines for the better part of an hour, with each soldier contributing their own theories about human weakness and incompetence. They discussed the primitive nature of human technology, the likely cowardice of human military personnel, and the inevitable speed of human defeat once hostilities commenced. Through it all, Commander Reistock remained silent, watching and listening, but offering no comments or contributions to the discussion. When other soldiers occasionally glanced in his direction, they saw only the impassive expression of a warrior lost in thought. preparing for yet another routine military operation. None of them suspected that the ancient commander was actually feeling something he hadn't experienced in decades of warfare: genuine uncertainty about the outcome of an impending battle. As the Asterisk Valdris continued its journey toward the Terra 7 system, carrying its cargo of confident alien warriors toward what they assumed would be an easy victory, none of them could have imagined that they were about to encounter something that would challenge every assumption they had made about human capabilities. The legends they were mocking were about to become very, very real. The bridge of the Valdris hummed with quiet efficiency as the massive transport ship emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Terra 7 system. Captain Zethkar stood before the main display screen, his four arms working controls, while his compound eyes analyzed the tactical readouts streaming across multiple monitors. "Sensor sweep complete, Captain," reported Lieutenant Velnash from the navigation station. "We're detecting the human colony as expected, located on the third planet. Single orbital station, approximately 12 surface installations, and—" The lieutenant paused, mandibles clicking uncertainly. "And what, Lieutenant?" "Sir, we're detecting more ships than intelligence predicted. Much more." Zethkar's attention focused sharply on the sensor display. According to their briefings, they should be seeing a handful of primitive human vessels, probably converted cargo haulers with basic defensive weapons mounted as an afterthought. Instead, the screen showed dozens of contacts arranged in precise formation patterns around the planet. "Magnify Sector 7, Zethkar ordered. The main screen shifted to show a clearer view of the human defensive positions. What they saw made several bridge officers exchange uncertain glances. The human ships weren't the converted civilian vessels they had expected. These were clearly purpose-built military craft, sleek and angular, arranged in overlapping defensive grids that suggested sophisticated tactical planning. "Sir," Velnesh said quietly, "these formations, they're actually quite clever. See how they've positioned their vessels to provide mutual support while maintaining clear firing lanes. And those smaller ships moving in patrol patterns, they're using the planet's gravity well to maximize their sensor coverage." Captain Zethkar studied the display more carefully. He had expected to find humans huddled around their colony like frightened animals, maybe with a few armed ships hiding behind the planet. Instead, he was looking at what appeared to be a properly organized defensive fleet that had clearly been expecting their arrival. "How many ships total?" he asked. 47 combat vessels of various sizes, plus numerous support craft," the sensor operator reported. "And Captain, they're moving to intercept us." "Already?" Zethkar's mandibles clicked with surprise. Most primitive species took hours to organize any kind of response to an approaching threat. These humans were reacting like experienced military professionals. "Sir, incoming communication from the human fleet," announced the communications officer. "They're requesting identification and stating our intentions." "Put it through." The bridge speakers crackled with static before a clear human voice emerged, speaking in accented but perfectly understandable common tongue. "Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Colonial Defense Force. You have entered the Terra 7 defensive zone without authorization. Please state your intentions and prepare for inspection." Zethkar blinked all four eyes in surprise. The voice belonged to a female human, speaking with the calm authority of someone accustomed to command. More importantly, she wasn't begging or pleading, she was giving orders. "This is Captain Zethkar of the Hegemony Defense Corps," he replied, deciding to follow standard first contact protocols despite his surprise. "We are here to establish a forward operating base in this system. You will withdraw your forces and prepare for peaceful integration into the hegemony." There was a brief pause before the human admiral responded, and when she did, there was something in her tone that Zethkar couldn't quite identify. It might have been amusement. "Captain Zethkar, this system is under the protection of the Terran Colonial Defense Force. We cannot permit the establishment of unauthorized military installations in our territory. I suggest you reconsider your intentions." In the cargo hold below, the assembled alien soldiers were listening to the exchange through the ship's internal communication system. The initial confidence that had filled the compartment was beginning to give way to puzzlement. "Did she just refuse surrender?" asked Private Nixara, her amphibian features expressing confusion. Maybe she doesn't understand the situation, suggested Sergeant Voxtel, though his massive stone-like frame seemed less relaxed than it had been hours earlier. Primitives might not recognize the futility of resistance against superior forces. Corporal Thaindros was studying a tactical display on his personal communicator, showing the deployment of human ships around Terra 7. These formations don't look like the work of primitives. Look at the spacing, the overlapping fields of fire. Someone with serious military training designed this defensive grid. It's probably just copied from some textbook, dismissed Private Yelmoth, though his voice lacked its earlier certainty. Even primitives can follow instructions. But other soldiers were beginning to notice details that didn't match their expectations. The human ships moved with precision, maintaining perfect formation spacing while adjusting their positions in response to the *Valdris**S approach. Their communication protocols were crisp and professional. Most importantly, they showed no signs of panic or confusion in the face of a superior force. On the bridge, Captain Zethkar was dealing with his own growing sense of unease. The human admiral's response had been too calm, too confident. Either these humans were too stupid to understand the danger they were in, or they knew something he didn't. "Admiral Chen," he said, trying to project authority while gathering more information, "surely you understand that resistance is futile. The hegemony possesses military capabilities far beyond anything your species has encountered. I am prepared to offer generous terms for your surrender." "Captain," came the reply, "I appreciate your concern for our welfare, but we are quite familiar with hegemony capabilities. We've been monitoring your expansion into this region for some time. We're prepared to defend our territory." The casual mention of monitoring hegemony activities sent a chill through the bridge crew. How could these primitive humans have been tracking hegemony military movements without being detected? "Sir," whispered the sensor operator, "I'm reading some unusual energy signatures from those human ships. Their power output is much higher than our intelligence suggested." Zethkar studied the readouts more carefully. The human vessels were indeed generating massive amounts of energy, far more than should be possible with the primitive technology described in their briefing files. "Lieutenant Velnesh, are our files on human technology current?" "Yes, sir, compiled just 3 months ago from the most recent intelligence-gathering operations." But what they were seeing suggested that either the intelligence was wrong or human technology had advanced dramatically in a very short time. Both possibilities were disturbing. "Admiral Chen," Zethkar tried again, "perhaps there has been some misunderstanding. The hegemony seeks only to bring peace and order to this region of space. Your cooperation would be appreciated." "Peace and order." The human admiral's voice carried what was definitely amusement now. "Captain, we've seen what hegemony peace looks like on other worlds. We'll pass." In the cargo hold, Commander Reistok finally opened his eyes and stood up. The ancient warrior had been listening to the exchange with growing interest, and what he heard was beginning to confirm his worst suspicions about this mission. The younger soldiers around him were still making jokes, but their laughter was becoming forced. Even the most confident among them were starting to notice that something didn't feel right about this situation. "Commander," asked Private Jexlor, "is it normal for primitives to be this organized?" Reistok looked at the young soldier for a long moment before answering. "I've been fighting wars for over 2 centuries, he said quietly. "And I've learned that when the enemy seems too confident, there's usually a reason." "But they're just humans," protested Nixara. "What could they possibly do against us?" Instead of answering immediately, Reistok moved to one of the tactical displays and began studying the human ship formations. The more he looked, the more impressed he became. These weren't the random deployments of frightened colonists. This was the work of military professionals who understood space combat at a fundamental level. "Tell me," he said to the group at large, "what do you see when you look at these human positions?" Thaindros glanced at the display. Standard defensive grid, nothing special. "Look closer. Notice how they've positioned their heavier ships to take advantage of the planet's gravitational field. See how their lighter vessels are arranged to provide early warning while maintaining escape routes. Look at the spacing between their formations." As the soldiers studied the display more carefully, several of them began to see what the commander was pointing out. The human deployment wasn't just organized, it was sophisticated. But how could primitives know these tactics? Asked Voxtel, his confidence beginning to waver. Maybe, Rystok said slowly, they aren't as primitive as we assumed. This comment sent a ripple of unease through the assembled soldiers. The idea that their intelligence might be wrong, that humans might be more capable than expected, was disturbing on multiple levels. On the bridge, the situation was becoming more tense by the minute. Admiral Chen had made it clear that the humans intended to resist, and the defensive positions around Terra 7 suggested they had the capability to back up their words. "Sir," reported the tactical officer, "the human fleet is moving into attack formation. They're not backing down." Zethkar felt all four of his stomachs tighten. This wasn't how the mission was supposed to unfold. According to every projection, every piece of intelligence, every logical analysis, the humans should have surrendered by now. "Admiral Chen, this is your final warning. Withdraw your forces immediately or face the consequences." "Captain Zethkar," the human admiral replied, and now her voice carried steel. "This is our space, our colony, our people. If you want Terra 7, you're going to have to take it." The communication channel closed with an audible click. For a moment, the bridge of the Valdris was silent except for the humming of instruments and the quiet breathing of the crew. Then Zethkar straightened to his full height and activated the ship's general communications system. "All hands, this is the captain. The humans have refused to surrender peacefully. All military personnel report to combat stations. This is not a drill." In the cargo hold, the alien soldiers began moving with the practiced efficiency of professional warriors, gathering weapons and checking equipment. But the easy confidence of a few hours earlier was gone, replaced by a more focused, serious demeanor. "So much for the shortest conquest in history," muttered Corsine as she checked the charge on her energy rifle. "Maybe they'll collapse as soon as we start shooting," suggested Unit 774, though the mechanical being's electronic voice seemed to lack its earlier certainty. Commander Rystok was already fully armed and armored, having quietly prepared his equipment while the others had been joking. Now he stood near the cargo hold's main display, watching the tactical situation develop. "Commander," asked Sergeant Voxtel, "what do you think we're really facing here?" The ancient warrior was quiet for a long moment, studying the human ship movements on the screen. The patterns he saw there were troubling, not because they were chaotic or desperate, but because they were entirely too calm and professional. "I think," he said finally, "we're about to find out why humans have legends." Before anyone could ask what he meant by that cryptic comment, the ship's weapons officer announced over the intercom, "All stations, weapons are hot. Prepare for engagement." Through the viewports of the cargo hold, the soldiers could see the human fleet moving into position. The ships moved with precision and purpose, their formations shifting to present maximum firepower while maintaining defensive integrity. Whatever these humans were, they certainly didn't fight like primitives. "Look at that," breathed Private Jexlor, pointing at the display. "They're not even trying to run." It was true. Rather than fleeing in the face of superior firepower, the human ships were actually advancing, moving to engage the much larger hegemony vessel. It was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. "All right," Captain Zethkar's voice echoed through the ship. "Let's show these humans what they're dealing with. Tactical, target their lead ships. Fire when ready." The Valdris shuddered as its main batteries opened fire, sending streams of energy toward the advancing human fleet. The alien soldiers watched through their viewports and on tactical displays, expecting to see human ships vaporized by the overwhelming firepower. Instead, something happened that none of them had anticipated. The human ships scattered like a school of fish, moving with coordination and speed that defied everything they had been told about human capabilities. Energy beams that should have reduced primitive vessels to debris instead passed harmlessly through empty space as their targets danced away with impossible grace. "Did they just?" Nixera started to ask. "Dodge," completed Thandros, his scales shifting to colors indicating deep confusion. "They actually dodged our weapons' fire." On the tactical display, the human ships were reforming their attack patterns, moving with a fluid coordination that spoke of extensive training and combat experience. These weren't the random movements of panicked primitives. This was the work of skilled pilots who knew exactly what they were doing. And then the human ships began to return fire. The first human energy beams struck the Valdris*S shields, and the ship shuddered in a way that made several soldiers grab for support. The impacts weren't the pinpricks they had expected from primitive weapons. They were solid, powerful hits that actually stressed the ship's defensive systems. "Sir," the tactical officer's voice came over the intercom, clearly shaken. "Human weapons are more powerful than expected. Shield strength down to 85% from that first volley." In the cargo hold, the alien soldiers exchanged worried glances. Hegemony shields were designed to withstand sustained bombardment from advanced military weapons. The fact that primitive human guns had reduced their effectiveness by 15% with a single volley was deeply troubling. "How is this possible?" whispered Yelmoth. "Their technology is supposed to be decades behind ours." Commander Reistock was studying the tactical readouts with the focused attention of a warrior who had survived countless battles. What he saw there made his blood run cold. "Because," he said quietly, "our intelligence was wrong, dead wrong." The human fleet was moving through a series of coordinated attack patterns that demonstrated not only advanced technology, but sophisticated tactical understanding. Their ships worked together like parts of a single organism, covering each other's movements while maintaining constant pressure on the much larger hegemony vessel. More disturbing still was the precision of their fire. Human weapons weren't just powerful, they were accurate, targeting specific sections of the Valdris with surgical precision. This wasn't the random shooting of desperate primitives. This was the focused bombardment of experienced warriors who knew exactly how to take apart an enemy ship. "All sections report damage," Captain Zethkar ordered over the intercom. The reports that came back painted a picture that no one on board wanted to hear. Human weapons were systematically weakening key systems, targeting shield generators, weapon emplacements, and engine sections with disturbing accuracy. "Sir," came a report from engineering, "they're not just shooting randomly. They know our ship design. They're hitting us exactly where it hurts most." This information sent a new wave of unease through the alien soldiers. How could humans know hegemony ship design well enough to target critical systems? The obvious implication was that they had been studying hegemony technology for much longer than anyone had realized. "Commander Reistock," asked Private Jexlor, his voice tight with growing fear, "how do primitives fight like this?" The ancient warrior was watching the tactical display with the expression of someone seeing a familiar but unwelcome sight. "They don't," he said simply, "which means these humans aren't primitives." Before anyone could respond to this observation, the ship shook violently as another human volley found its mark. This time, the lights in the cargo hold flickered ominously. "Shield integrity down to 60%, announced the tactical officer, requesting permission to withdraw to safe distance. "Negative," Captain Zethkar replied, though his voice carried a strain that hadn't been there at the beginning of the engagement. "Continue the attack. Deploy fighter squadrons." Through the viewports, the soldiers could see small craft launching from the Valdris*S fighter bays. The sleek interceptors shot toward the human fleet like deadly arrows, their advanced targeting systems locking onto enemy vessels. For a moment, it seemed like the tide of battle might turn. The hegemony fighters were among the most advanced small craft in the galaxy, piloted by warriors with years of training and equipped with weapons that could punch through capital ship armor. But as they closed with the human fleet, something unexpected happened. Human fighters rose to meet them. The alien soldiers watched in growing amazement as human small craft engaged their supposedly superior counterparts. Not only did the human fighters hold their own, they actually seemed to have the advantage. "Look at them move," breathed Corsine, her feline features expressing something approaching awe. The human pilots flew their craft with a skill and aggressiveness that defied everything the aliens had been told about human capabilities. They used maneuvers that pushed the limits of physics, pulling acceleration forces that should have killed any carbon-based life form. "No one can fly like that," protested Voxtull, watching a human fighter execute a turn that should have been impossible. "The G-forces alone would liquefy their internal organs." But the evidence was right in front of them. Human pilots were not only surviving these extreme maneuvers, they were using them to outfight some of the best pilots in the galaxy. One by one, hegemony fighters began falling to human weapons. Each loss struck the watching soldiers like a physical blow. These weren't supposed to be primitives shooting down advanced military craft with lucky shots. These were skilled warriors systematically destroying everything sent against them. "Sir," came another report over the intercom, "we've lost 60% of our fighter squadron. The survivors are requesting permission to withdraw." The cargo hold fell silent except for the sound of increasingly frequent impact tremors as human weapons continued to pound the Valdris asterisk. For the first time since boarding the ship, the assembled alien soldiers were beginning to understand that they might not be facing easy prey. They might be facing predators. The lights in the cargo hold flickered again as another series of human weapons impacts shook the Valdris asterisk. Emergency lighting bathed the assembled alien soldiers in red shadows, and the confident jokes of a few hours earlier seemed like memories from another lifetime. "Shield integrity at 40% and falling," announced the tactical officer over the intercom. Captain Zethkar's voice carried obvious strain as he responded. "All available power to defensive systems. Prepare emergency jump coordinates." In the cargo hold, the reality of their situation was finally sinking in. Private Nixara's amphibian features had shifted to colors indicating deep stress. "They're preparing to retreat against primitives." "Look around you," Commander Reistok said grimly, gesturing at the flickering lights and feeling another impact tremor through the deck plates. "Does this look like we're fighting primitives?" Sergeant Voxtel's massive stone-like frame was pressed against one of the viewports, watching the ongoing battle outside. "They're fighters. I've never seen anything move like that. How are human pilots pulling those maneuvers?" Through the transparent aluminum, they could see the dance of combat continuing around them. Human fighters moved through space with an almost supernatural grace, executing turns and acceleration patterns that defied everything the aliens knew about physics and biology. They fought with a precision and aggression that was absolutely terrifying. "Sir," Private Jexlor asked Commander Reistok, "in all your years of combat, have you ever seen anything like this?" The ancient warrior watched a human fighter execute a maneuver that sent it spinning through a killing field of energy beams without taking a single hit, then emerged to destroy two hegemony interceptors with perfectly placed shots. "Once," he said quietly, "during the machine wars, there was a species called the Cathara. They were masters of space combat, could make their ships move like living things. It took the combined fleets of 6 different civilizations to finally defeat them." "What happened to the Cathara?" asked Corporal Thaindros. "They died fighting," Reistok replied. "Every last one of them. They never surrendered, never retreated, never gave ground until there were none of them left to fight." The implications of this comparison hung heavy in the recycled air of the cargo hold. If humans fought like the legendary Cathara, then this mission had just become exponentially more dangerous than anyone had imagined. "But humans are supposed to be weak," protested Unit 774, its mechanical voice carrying electronic distortion that suggested its systems were struggling to process the contradiction between expectation and reality. "Our intelligence files clearly state that human physical capabilities are inferior to most spacefaring species." "Maybe our intelligence is wrong," suggested Private Yelmoth. "Or maybe humans have other advantages we didn't know about." Commander Reistok was studying the tactical displays with the focused attention of a professional warrior, trying to understand a new and dangerous enemy. What he saw there challenged everything he thought he knew about human capabilities. "Look at their ship movements," he said, pointing at the main tactical screen. "See how they coordinate their attacks. That level of organization requires either advanced artificial intelligence or exceptional natural reflexes and intuition." The human fleet was moving through complex attack patterns that maximized their firepower while minimizing their exposure to return fire. Individual ships would dart in to deliver precise strikes, then fade back into the protection of the formation while other vessels took their place. It was like watching a pack of predators hunting something much larger than themselves. "They're treating us like prey," Corsine realized, her feline features expressing a mixture of admiration and concern. "This isn't a desperate last stand, it's a coordinated hunt." Another violent impact sent several soldiers reaching for handholds as the ship lurched sideways. The sound of stressed metal echoed through the hull, and somewhere in the distance, alarms began blaring. "Damage report," Captain Zethkar's voice demanded over the intercom. Multiple hull breaches on decks 7 through 12, came the response. Shield generators are operating at minimum efficiency. Weapons systems, sir, we've lost primary forward batteries. The cargo hold fell silent except for the ambient noise of a ship under severe stress. The Valdris was one of the most advanced military vessels in the hegemony fleet, equipped with armor and weapons designed to take on entire planetary defense forces. The fact that human ships were systematically dismantling it was beyond disturbing. "How many human ships are attacking us?" asked Nixera. Rystok consulted his tactical display. 12 human ships are doing this to us." The number hit the assembled soldiers like a physical blow. The Valdris carried a full company of elite troops and enough firepower to sterilize a planet. 12 primitive ships should have been destroyed in the first minutes of combat. Instead, those 12 ships were winning. "Sir," came another report over the intercom, "engineering reports that our faster-than-light drive is offline. We're trapped in the system until repairs can be completed." This announcement sparked the first real panic among the soldiers. Being stranded in hostile territory was every military professional's nightmare, and the thought of being trapped while facing an enemy that was proving far more dangerous than expected was terrifying. "Calm down," Rystok ordered, his voice cutting through the rising chatter. "We're soldiers of the Hegemony Defense Corps. We don't panic and we don't give up." But even as he spoke the words, the commander was privately acknowledging that their situation was becoming desperate. The humans had not only outfought them in space, they had done it with apparent ease. "Commander," asked Sergeant Voxtel, "what do we do now?" Before Rystok could answer, Captain Zethkar's voice echoed through the ship. "All personnel, prepare for emergency landing procedures. We are going to set down on Terra 7 and establish a defensive perimeter." The announcement sent a new wave of unease through the cargo hold. Landing on an enemy planet while under fire was one of the most dangerous operations in military doctrine, and the fact that they were being forced into it by supposedly primitive humans made it even worse. "At least on the ground we'll have some advantages," suggested Private Jexlor, clearly trying to find something positive about their situation. "Will we?" Commander Rystok asked quietly. "If humans can fight like this in space, what makes you think they'll be easier to handle on their own planet?" It was a sobering question. Everything they had assumed about human capabilities had proven wrong so far. There was no reason to believe that human ground forces would be any less dangerous than their space fleet. As the Valdris began its descent toward Terra 7, the soldiers could see the planet's surface approaching through the viewports. What they saw there didn't provide much comfort. Instead of the primitive settlements they had expected, they were looking at what appeared to be a well-developed colony with sophisticated infrastructure and obvious military installations. "Those aren't prefab shelters," observed Thaindros, studying the surface installations through enhanced optics. "Those are permanent structures built to last. How long have humans been on this planet?" "Intelligence said 50 years, replied Yelmoth, but his voice carried doubt. "Look at those cities," Corsine said, pointing to sprawling urban areas visible from orbit. "That's centuries of development, not 50 years. The implications were becoming clear to everyone in the cargo hold. Either their intelligence was completely wrong about human presence in this system, or humans were capable of development and construction at rates far beyond what anyone had assumed. "Sir," Private Jexlor asked Commander Rystok, "how much of what we were told about humans was accurate?" The ancient warrior was studying the approaching planet with the expression of someone seeing confirmation of his worst fears. Apparently very little. As the ship descended through Terra 7's atmosphere, they could see human aircraft rising to meet them. The alien soldiers had expected to encounter primitive flying machines, probably converted civilian craft with weapons bolted on as afterthoughts. Instead, they found themselves facing sleek military aircraft that moved with the same supernatural grace they had witnessed in space. Human atmospheric fighters were intercepting the Asterisk Valdris with coordinated precision, their weapons striking the damaged ship with surgical accuracy. "They're not trying to destroy us," Rystok observed, watching the pattern of human attacks. "They're forcing us to land in a specific location." It was true. Rather than attempting to shoot down the crippled transport, human fighters were hurting it toward a particular area of the planet's surface. The attacks were precisely calibrated to damage non-essential systems while leaving the ship capable of landing. They want us alive, Voxtel realized. But why? Prisoners, suggested Nixara. Maybe they want to interrogate us about hegemony capabilities. But Commander Reistock was thinking along different lines. Or maybe they want to fight us on equal terms. The idea sent a chill through the assembled soldiers. The possibility that humans might actually want to engage in ground combat, rather than simply eliminating their enemies from a safe distance, suggested a level of confidence that was deeply unsettling. "Prepare for hard landing," announced Captain Zethkar. "All personnel secure for impact." The Valdris struck Terra 7's surface with bone-jarring force, the ship's damaged systems struggling to cushion the impact. Emergency lighting flickered on throughout the vessel as main power failed, and the acrid smell of burning electronics filled the air. For several minutes after landing, the ship was silent except for the sound of settling metal and the hiss of escaping atmosphere from damaged sections. Then Captain Zethkar's voice echoed through the emergency communication system. "All sections report status. Damage control teams to emergency stations. All military personnel prepare for ground operations." In the cargo hold, the alien soldiers were already moving with practiced efficiency, gathering weapons and equipment while conducting quick systems checks on their armor and communications gear. Despite the shocking revelation of human capabilities, they were still professional warriors with years of training. "Sir," Sergeant Voxtel asked Commander Reistock, "what are your orders?" The ancient warrior was studying a tactical display showing their landing site. The Valdris had come down in what appeared to be a natural clearing surrounded by dense forest. It was an excellent defensive position for the ship, but it also provided numerous concealment opportunities for attacking forces. "Standard perimeter protocol," Reistock ordered. "Establish defensive positions around the ship, full sensor sweeps. Nobody goes anywhere alone and everyone stays alert." "Are we expecting immediate attack?" asked Corsine. "After what we've seen of human capabilities, yes, and I expect it to come sooner than we'd like." As the cargo bay doors opened and the alien soldiers began deploying around their crashed ship, they found themselves in an alien forest under an alien sky. The air was breathable but carried unfamiliar scents, and the sounds of native wildlife echoed through the trees. For a few minutes, everything seemed peaceful. The soldiers established their perimeter, set up sensors, and began assessing their situation. The Valdris was badly damaged but still provided good cover, and their equipment was mostly functional. Then Private Jexlor, manning a sensor station at the ship's bow, called out, "Contact! Human forces approaching from the north." All eyes turned toward the forest in that direction, where nothing was visible through the dense vegetation. But the sensors didn't lie. Something was moving through the trees, approaching their position with what appeared to be considerable stealth and organization. "How many?" Commander Reistock asked. "Difficult to determine exactly," Jexlor replied, studying his readings carefully. "The signals are strange. It's like they're partially masked somehow." This observation sent another wave of unease through the defensive line. Hegemony sensors were designed to detect virtually any form of life or technology. The fact that human forces could partially evade detection suggested yet another capability that hadn't appeared in any intelligence briefing. "All positions prepare for contact," Reistock ordered. "Remember, these humans have already proven they're more dangerous than expected. Don't underestimate them." As if in response to his words, the forest around them suddenly came alive with movement. Human soldiers emerged from concealment with a coordination and stealth that left the alien defenders scrambling to track multiple targets. But these weren't the primitive warriors the aliens had been expecting. The humans were equipped with advanced armor and weapons, moving with the fluid precision of highly trained special forces. They used the terrain like experts, appearing and disappearing among the trees with almost supernatural skill. "Contact left," shouted Sergeant Voxtel as energy beams began flashing between the trees. The battle for Terra 7 had begun, and from the first exchange of fire, it was clear that the humans intended to fight for every meter of ground. Commander Reistock found himself facing an enemy that challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare. These human soldiers moved like ghosts through their native forest, striking from unexpected directions before fatting back into concealment. "Sir," called out Private Nixara, "I can't get a clear shot. They're using the forest too effectively." It was a problem affecting the entire defensive line. The aliens had superior firepower and better armor, but the humans were fighting on their home ground with a level of tactical sophistication that was proving extremely difficult to counter. "Fall back to secondary positions," Rystok ordered. "Use the ship for cover." As his soldiers began a fighting withdrawal toward the Valdris asterisk, the commander found himself wondering what other surprises these remarkable humans might have in store for them. The legends they had mocked were becoming reality, and the reality was far more dangerous than any of them had imagined. The forest around the crashed Valdris had become a deadly maze of shadows and sudden violence. Commander Rystok crouched behind the twisted wreckage of what had once been the ship's primary sensor array, watching human soldiers move through the trees like deadly spirits. In the 3 hours since the ground battle had begun, his professional assessment of human capabilities had undergone another complete revision. These weren't just competent soldiers. They were operating at a level that challenged the best military forces in the galaxy. "Sir," whispered Corporal Thaindros from his position behind a fallen tree, "I count at least 40 human soldiers in this sector alone. They're coordinating their movements perfectly." Rystok studied the tactical display on his wrist computer, trying to track the human forces surrounding their position. The readings were frustrating. Human soldiers appeared and disappeared from sensors as if they possessed some form of cloaking technology. Yet intelligence had insisted that humans lacked such advanced capabilities. "How are they doing it?" asked Sergeant Voxtel, his massive frame hunched behind the ship's landing gear. "Our sensors should detect anything larger than a small animal." "Maybe they're smaller than we thought," suggested Private Nixara, but her joke fell flat in the current circumstances. The truth was becoming increasingly clear to everyone in the defense force. Human soldiers were employing stealth techniques that bordered on the supernatural. They moved through their forest environment with an understanding of concealment and fieldcraft that impressed even seasoned veterans. "Commander," came a report over the tactical communication network, "this is Lieutenant Corsine. My squad is pinned down near the ship's aft section. These humans, they're using our own tactics against us." It was a disturbing observation. The humans weren't fighting like primitive warriors throwing themselves against superior firepower. They were employing sophisticated military doctrine, using coordinated unit tactics and advanced battlefield communication to maximum effect. More troubling still was their apparent understanding of hegemony equipment and capabilities. Human attacks consistently targeted weak points in alien armor and weapons systems, suggesting detailed knowledge of enemy technology. "Sir," Private Jexlor called from his position at the ship's main entrance, "incoming human forces from multiple directions. They're trying to surround us completely." Commander Rystok activated his personal communicator. "All units, report status." The responses that came back painted a picture of a defense force under increasing pressure. Human soldiers were probing their perimeter at multiple points, testing defenses, and looking for weaknesses with the patience and skill of professionals. "This is Squad 7, reported Unit 774. "Humans have established observation posts overlooking our position. They appear to be studying our defensive arrangements." "Squad 12 here," added another voice. "We've identified at least 3 separate human command posts coordinating the attack. Their organization is impressive." The reluctant admiration in that last comment spoke volumes. These were elite alien soldiers acknowledging that their human opponents were demonstrating tactical sophistication worthy of respect. "Sir," Sergeant Voxtel asked, "should we attempt a breakout, try to reach more defensible terrain?" Rystok considered the suggestion, but a glance at his tactical display showed human positions completely surrounding their landing site. Any movement away from the ship would expose them to crossfire from multiple directions. "Negative, we hold our position and wait for extraction." But privately, the commander was beginning to doubt that extraction would be possible. The Valdris was too damaged to fly, and calling for rescue would mean admitting to high command that a full company of elite troops was being defeated by primitive humans. "Contact front," shouted Private Yelmoth as human soldiers emerged from the tree line, advancing on their position with covering fire from concealed positions. The aliens responded with disciplined volleys from their energy weapons, but the humans moved with such coordination and speed that few shots found their marks. They used natural cover expertly, advancing in short rushes while maintaining suppressive fire that kept the defenders pinned down. "They're not charging our lines," observed Thandros. "They're dismantling our defenses piece by piece." It was an accurate assessment. Rather than attempting a costly frontal assault, human forces were methodically reducing the aliens' defensive capabilities through precision strikes and tactical pressure. They eliminated sensor stations, targeted communication equipment, and systematically weakened the perimeter without exposing themselves to unnecessary casualties. "Sir," Nixara called out, "I'm seeing something strange. These humans, they're not using standard military formations." Commander Reistok studied the approaching forces more carefully. The human soldiers were indeed moving in patterns that didn't match conventional military doctrine. Instead, they seemed to flow through the battlefield like water, adapting their formations to terrain and circumstances in real time. "They're improvising," he realized. "Each squad is operating independently but maintaining coordination with the larger force." It was a level of tactical flexibility that required exceptional training and natural ability. Most military forces relied on rigid formations and predetermined procedures to maintain order in combat. These humans were demonstrating the capability to adapt their tactics moment by moment while maintaining perfect coordination. "How is that possible?" asked Jexlor. "That kind of flexibility should lead to chaos and confusion." But what they were witnessing was the opposite of chaos. Human forces moved with fluid precision, each soldier appearing to understand instinctively how their actions fit into the larger tactical picture. It was like watching a single organism with dozens of bodies. "Sir," came a report from Squad 3, "we've lost contact with our forward observation post. Human forces have infiltrated our perimeter." This news sent a chill through the defensive positions. The idea that humans had managed to penetrate their supposedly secure perimeter suggested levels of stealth and infiltration capability that bordered on the impossible. "All units conduct immediate area sweeps," Reistok ordered. "Full sensor protocols." But even as he gave the order, the commander suspected it would be futile. If humans could avoid detection while moving through open forest, they would be nearly impossible to locate once they had found concealment within the defensive perimeter. "Commander," Voxtel said quietly, "we need to consider the possibility that we're outmatched." It was a difficult admission for any professional soldier to make, but the evidence was becoming overwhelming. Human forces were demonstrating capabilities that exceeded everything in their intelligence files, and they were doing it with an apparent ease that suggested they were operating well within their limits. "Sir," Private Yelmoth called out urgently, "movement in the ship. There are humans inside the *Valdris*. The implications of this hit the assembled soldiers like a physical blow. If humans had managed to infiltrate the ship itself, they could be anywhere. Worse, they might have access to critical systems, communication equipment, or weapons storage areas. "How did they get inside?" demanded Thandros. "We've been watching all the entrances." Commander Reistok was studying his tactical display with growing alarm. The sensor readings showed multiple contacts moving through the ship's interior corridors, but there was no indication of how they had gained entry. "Maintenance shafts," he realized grimly. "They found access points we didn't know existed." Human infiltration teams had apparently studied the ship's design in detail, identifying entry routes that even the crew hadn't considered vulnerable. It suggested a level of preparation and intelligence gathering that was deeply disturbing. "All squads fall back to the ship's main cargo bay," Reistok ordered. "We consolidate our defenses and deny them access to critical systems." But as his soldiers began moving toward the ship's interior, they found themselves facing a new and unexpected challenge. The human forces outside weren't attempting to prevent their withdrawal. Instead, they seemed to be herding them toward specific areas of the ship. "Sir," reported Corsin, "the humans are letting us retreat. They're not even trying to stop us." This observation was troubling on multiple levels. Either the humans lacked the capability to prevent the alien withdrawal, or they had reasons for wanting the defenders to move in specific directions. "It's a trap," Voxtel rumbled, his massive frame tense with anticipation. "They want us concentrated in one location." Commander Reistock was beginning to reach the same conclusion. Human tactics had been too sophisticated, too coordinated, for this to be a random engagement. The entire battle was being orchestrated according to some larger plan. "All units halt current movement," he ordered. "Maintain current positions until further notice." But before his soldiers could respond to the new orders, the decision was taken out of their hands. Explosive charges detonated simultaneously around the ship's perimeter, sending debris flying and temporarily blinding the defenders with clouds of dust and smoke. When the air cleared, human soldiers had advanced to within meters of the alien positions, moving with such speed and coordination that they seemed to have materialized from thin air. "Surrender your weapons," called a human voice in perfectly pronounced common tongue. "You are surrounded and outgunned. Lay down your arms and you will not be harmed." The voice belonged to a human female wearing advanced combat armor that incorporated design elements the aliens didn't recognize. Her face was visible through a transparent visor, and her expression was calm and confident. "This is Colonel Sarah Martinez of the Terran Colonial Defense Force," she continued. "Your ship is disabled, your perimeter is breached, and you have no means of escape. I'm offering you the opportunity to surrender with dignity." Commander Reistock found himself facing a moment that challenged everything he had believed about human capabilities. A human military officer was offering surrender terms to elite hegemony forces, and she was doing it from a position of obvious strength. "Colonel Martinez," he replied, stepping forward with his hands visible but still holding his weapons. "I am Commander Reistock of the Hegemony Defense Corps. What are your terms?" The human colonel's expression remained professional. "Disarm your soldiers and submit to temporary detention. You will be treated according to standard prisoner protocols and returned to hegemony space once political arrangements can be made. And if we refuse, then we will take you by force, and some of your soldiers may be injured or killed in the process. I would prefer to avoid unnecessary casualties." It was a reasonable offer, delivered with the calm authority of someone accustomed to command. But what struck Commander Reistock most forcefully was the underlying assumption in the human colonel's words. She wasn't asking them to surrender because she hoped they would. She was offering them the choice because she could afford to be generous. Human forces were so confident of victory that they could offer their enemies the luxury of surrendering with honor. "Sir," whispered Sergeant Voxtel, "what are your orders?" Commander Reistock looked around at his soldiers, seeing professional warriors who had fought with courage and skill against an enemy that had proven far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. They had given their best effort, but they were clearly outmatched by forces that operated at levels they hadn't known were possible. "Stand down," he ordered quietly. "Lower your weapons." One by one, the alien soldiers set down their arms and raised their hands in surrender. It was a moment that none of them would ever forget, the day that elite hegemony forces surrendered to humans. As human soldiers moved forward to secure the prisoners, Commander Reistock found himself face to face with Colonel Martinez. Up close, he could see that she was younger than he had expected, probably no older than most of his junior officers. "Colonel," he said, "may I ask how you knew so much about our capabilities and tactics?" The human officer smiled slightly. "We've been studying hegemony forces for quite some time, Commander. We believe in being prepared. But our intelligence indicated that humans were primitives with limited military experience." "Your intelligence was wrong." Her smile widened. "We've been fighting wars on dozens of worlds for over a century. We've learned a few things along the way." The implications of this casual revelation struck the alien commander like a physical blow. Everything they had been told about human military history was apparently false. Rather than being peaceful primitives, humans were experienced veterans of conflicts that spanned multiple star systems. "How many worlds?" he asked. "Classified information," Colonel Martinez replied, but her tone suggested the number was significant. "What I can tell you is that your people aren't the first to underestimate human capabilities." As the alien soldiers were led away to temporary detention facilities, Commander Reistock found himself wondering how many other species had made the same mistake his people had just made. The legends about humans were real, and they were far more dangerous than anyone in the hegemony had ever imagined. 6 months after the surrender on Terra 7, Commander Reistock stood in the observation deck of the human diplomatic vessel Endeavour, watching the hegemony homeworld grow larger in the forward viewports. The ancient warrior bore new scars from his time as a prisoner, but they were not the marks of mistreatment or torture. They were the results of voluntary training exercises with human military instructors. The months of detention had been unlike anything he had expected. Rather than being confined in standard prison facilities, the captured alien soldiers had been housed in what humans called educational internment, a form of custody that emphasized learning and understanding rather than punishment. "Commander," came a voice from behind him, "Admiral Chen would like to speak with you before we reach the station." Reistock turned to see Lieutenant Colonel David Park, one of the human officers who had served as his primary contact during the detention period. The young human had proven to be an exceptional military professional, combining tactical knowledge with a genuine interest in cross-species cooperation. "Of course, Colonel," Reistock replied, "though I confess I'm still adjusting to being addressed by my rank rather than my prisoner number." Park smiled, an expression that Reistock had learned to read as genuine warmth rather than the predatory display he had initially assumed. "The Admiral was very specific about that. She said you were professional soldiers doing your duty, not criminals." As they walked through the ship's corridors toward the Admiral's quarters, Reistock reflected on the extraordinary transformation his understanding had undergone during his captivity. The humans had not only demonstrated military capabilities far beyond anything in hegemony intelligence files, they had shown an approach to warfare and diplomacy that challenged fundamental assumptions about how advanced civilizations operated. "Colonel Park," he said as they paused outside the Admiral's door, "may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "During our capture, your forces could have easily eliminated us. Why did you choose to take prisoners instead?" The human officer considered the question carefully. "Because killing you wouldn't have solved the larger problem. Our species were operating under false assumptions about each other. The only way to address that was through communication and education." It was a perspective that no hegemony military doctrine had ever considered. The idea that enemy soldiers could be valuable as sources of understanding rather than simply obstacles to be eliminated was revolutionary. Admiral Chen's quarters were larger than expected, configured as much for meetings and negotiations as for personal use. The human admiral herself was a woman in her 60s, with gray-streaked hair and the kind of calm authority that came from decades of command experience. "Commander Reistock," she said, rising from behind her desk, "please sit down. I wanted to speak with you privately before we reach the diplomatic station." Reistock settled into a chair designed for his species' physiology, another small indication of the care humans had taken to accommodate their prisoners. "Admiral, I must express my gratitude for the treatment my soldiers and I have received. Your people have shown remarkable restraint." "Restraint?" Admiral Chen raised an eyebrow. "Commander, we've been at war with your people for 6 months. What we've shown is strategic thinking." The casual mention of ongoing warfare sent a chill through Reistock's system. During his detention, he had been largely isolated from news of the larger conflict, receiving only occasional briefings about prisoner exchanges and diplomatic initiatives. "Admiral, what is the current status of the war?" Chen activated a holographic display showing a three-dimensional map of the local galactic region. Blue indicators marked human-controlled territory, red showed hegemony space, and yellow designated contested systems. What Reistock saw there made all four of his stomachs clench with shock. In the 6 months since Terra 7, human forces had not only repelled hegemony invasions, they had gone on the offensive. Human-controlled territory had expanded by over 30%, with multiple hegemony worlds now under human occupation or protection. "How is this possible?" he whispered, studying the display with professional horror. "The hegemony has vast military superiority." "Does it?" Admiral Chen manipulated the display to show force comparisons. "Commander, your intelligence about human capabilities was wrong, but our intelligence about hegemony capabilities was quite accurate." The implication struck Reistock like a physical blow. If humans had possessed accurate intelligence while the hegemony operated under false assumptions, then every military engagement would have been fundamentally unbalanced. You've been preparing for this war for years, he realized. Decades, Chen corrected. We've been monitoring hegemony expansion patterns and studying your military capabilities since our first contact with refugee populations from conquered worlds. Refugee populations. The Admiral's expression hardened slightly. Commander, did you really believe that every species conquered by the hegemony simply accepted integration peacefully? There have been resistance movements, underground organizations, species seeking asylum in human space for over 50 years. This revelation challenged everything Rystok thought he knew about galactic politics. The hegemony's expansion had been presented as a process of voluntary integration, with primitive species eagerly joining the galactic community. The species we conquered, they weren't primitive. Some were, others were quite advanced but lacked the military capabilities to resist hegemony expansion. They brought us technology, intelligence, and most importantly, knowledge about how your people operate. Admiral Chen manipulated the display again, showing detailed analyses of hegemony ship designs, weapon systems, and tactical doctrines. The depth and accuracy of the information was staggering. My people have been fighting the hegemony indirectly for generations, she continued. We've studied your methods, learned your weaknesses, and prepared countermeasures for every advantage you thought you possessed. But why didn't you reveal yourselves sooner? Why allow the charade of primitive humans to continue? Because we needed time to prepare properly. Open warfare with the hegemony required careful coordination with dozens of other species, development of advanced military technologies, and the establishment of a unified command structure spanning multiple star systems. The scope of human preparations was becoming clear to Rystok, and it was far more extensive than anyone in the hegemony had imagined. Rather than being a small, primitive species stumbling into galactic politics, humans were the leaders of a vast alliance that had been planning anti-hegemony operations for decades. How many species are part of this alliance? He asked. Classified, Admiral Chen replied, but her slight smile suggested the number was significant. What I can tell you is that humanity is no longer alone in this conflict. And the current military situation. Your people are losing, Commander. Not quickly, but steadily and inevitably. The hegemony military is designed to fight primitive species and overwhelm them with superior technology. It's not prepared to face organized resistance from forces that understand your capabilities and have developed specific countermeasures. Rystok studied the tactical display more carefully, seeing patterns that confirmed the Admiral's assessment. Hegemony forces were being defeated not through overwhelming firepower or superior numbers, but through tactical sophistication and strategic planning. What happens now? He asked. That depends largely on the hegemony's willingness to negotiate reasonable peace terms, Chen replied. We're returning you and your soldiers as a gesture of good faith, along with a comprehensive proposal for ending hostilities. And if the hegemony refuses, then we continue military operations until they become more receptive to negotiation. The casual confidence in that statement was perhaps the most chilling thing Rystok had heard during the entire conversation. Admiral Chen wasn't threatening or boasting. She was simply stating a fact about human intentions and capabilities. Admiral, he said carefully, during my detention, I had extensive conversations with your military instructors. They mentioned something called human doctrine that I didn't fully understand. What specifically? The idea that humans prefer to fight defensive wars but excel at offensive operations. One of your officers said that humans were persistence hunters who could chase prey across entire continents. Admiral Chen's smile became more pronounced. An apt comparison. Commander, your people made a fundamental error when you assumed that humans were primitive because we hadn't revealed our true capabilities. What you interpreted as weakness was actually restraint. Restraint? We didn't want to fight this war, Commander. We hoped that coexistence was possible, that the hegemony's expansion could be managed through diplomacy and negotiation. We only revealed our military capabilities when it became clear that your people interpreted our peaceful intentions as weakness. The implications of this were staggering. Humans had possessed advanced military capabilities all along, but had chosen not to use them until forced to do so. The attack on Terra 7 hadn't been an assault on primitives. It had been an act of aggression against a species that was deliberately choosing not to retaliate. You could have prevented the war entirely, Rystok realized, if you had revealed your true capabilities from the beginning. Perhaps, but that would have required a level of trust that didn't exist between our species. Your people's expansion pattern suggested that you viewed any show of force as a challenge to be met with greater force. So you allowed us to attack first. We prepared for the possibility that you would attack first, Admiral Chen corrected. And we made sure that when you did, the consequences would be significant enough to encourage serious reconsideration of your expansion policies. As their conversation continued, Rystok began to understand that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Rather than expanding through conquest and intimidation like every other major power, humans had built an alliance based on mutual defense and shared opposition to aggressive expansion. Admiral, when we reach the diplomatic station, what should I tell my superiors about human intentions? Tell them the truth, Commander. Humans want peace, but we're prepared for war. We prefer cooperation, but we will defend ourselves and our allies. And most importantly, tell them that the era of unopposed hegemony expansion is over. The conversation was interrupted by an announcement over the ship's communication system. Admiral, we're approaching the diplomatic station. Hegemony vessels are requesting permission to come alongside. Granted, Chen replied, then turning,